Welcome back. The focus this week in Latitude is on Pakistan and its bilateral relations with India. And we now look at what really are Nawaz Sharif's challenges at home in trying to improve relations with India, primarily with obstruction likely to come from the army and jihadis who are both opposed to good relations with India.
This man has come in with a 60% mandate from the people of Pakistan. 14 years after being toppled, Nawaz Sharif is taking over as the next Prime Minister of Pakistan at a time when the country is faced with many challenges, especially when it comes to bilateral ties with India.
Even as Nawaz Sharif is brimming with confidence on taking over the reins of the new government, the job comes with a lot of challenges ahead. Mia Saab has promised change domestically as well as with India. But the big test would be to see him stand up against all those forces who do not wish for better Indo-Pak ties.
Internally, Nawaz Sharif has his task cut out for him. From reviving a crushed economy to the huge power outages that the country is suffering, bringing back credibility of the civilian government, and most importantly, tackling the terror networks. And that terror emanating from Pakistani soil is also India's biggest concern.
On matters of security, on the situation in Afghanistan, where India has invested extremely heavily and which is of great strategic interest, and a country with whom we have historical relations. And in terms of its eastern neighbor, India, the situation in Kashmir, I think these are areas where the army will still dominate, and he will find it extremely difficult to assert himself should he wish to do so.
Although Nawaz Sharif has been vociferously saying the constitution should be respected by all,
I think the rest of the army resented Mr. Musharraf's decision. They were not in agreement with his decision to take over the government and topple my government. So I don't hold the rest of the army responsible for that. So we have to work together. We are facing huge problems in this country, and we all have to be on the same page to be able to solve these problems.
the fact remains that the Pakistani army retains significant influence over Islamabad's India policy.
In his last two tenures, he has taken a very almost adversarial role with the military, and it didn't work out. The Pakistan Army is also a national institution, so it's important that he should work with all national institutions and all political parties.
India's biggest fear is not unfounded. Even as Nawaz promises to fight terror, the fact remains that Pakistan has used terror as an instrument of state policy to further its own vested interests. What remains to be seen is how and if the new Nawaz government counters that.
I don't know what attitude Mr. Nawaz Sharif takes, but our party's position is clear that there should be no armed groups within the country, and Pakistani soil should not be used for terrorism anywhere in the world. We are facing a huge challenge of terrorism internally. 40,000 people have been killed in the last 5 years.
Another factor to be counted is the Chinese influence on Pakistan, which is not likely to diminish for strategic reasons, be it the nuclear program, the Gwadar operations, or for that matter, the immense military support and backup that Pakistan enjoys from China. The message is clear: Nawaz Sharif will have to deliver through action and not mere words. And getting past the challenges that come in the way of better bilateral ties with India will be no mean task.
Clearly, Nawaz Sharif is faced with many obstacles and challenges as he wants to improve bilateral ties with India. And we have with us Jonathan Paris, an author of several reports, including one on Pakistan in 2030, and an expert on counterterrorism and a senior advisor with the Chertoff Group. Jonathan, my first question. Sharif wants the constitution to be respected. The army in Pakistan wants to continue to play a major role in Pakistan's security. So where do civil-military relations in Pakistan go from here?
My view is that to some extent Nawaz Sharif will be able to push a new agenda toward more peaceful relations, more comprehensive negotiations with India, its largest neighbor. But let's not forget the constraints that operate in the Pakistan political, economic, and security system. When it comes to security, the army is in charge. So I believe that Nawaz Sharif will be able to take some initiatives, but whether he can complete the initiatives will depend on his relationship with the army leadership.
Yeah, and linked to that is the issue of the proxies of the army, especially terror groups that have troubled India for decades now, that operate in the eastern part of Pakistan, and it is said that any measures that Nawaz Sharif wants initiated against terror groups to curtail terror activities, and he's promised India that he'll try and do his best, will have to have the blessings of the GHQ in Rawalpindi. So would that happen, or would that continue to be an area where, it'll be a cat and mouse game?
I think that the problem of terrorism, particularly Kashmiri-related extremists, is going to go on for a long time because they're too embedded in Pakistani society. But I think the army has, in its own interest, a desire to control these folks. It's not like 20 years ago where the army could use these people like robots to do their own bidding. Now these extremists have become their own masters. And in a sense, they are as dangerous to the army as they are to India.
Right, and there is another fundamental security dilemma that Pakistan's leadership will have to tackle, particularly in the next 2 years, and that's Afghanistan. And I see Afghanistan possibly becoming the next sort of big battleground between Pakistan, India, and other external countries which already have a role there, but the exit of the US, the Chinese wanting to play a big role. So do you see India and Pakistan clashing in Afghanistan?
It remains to be seen what will happen to Afghanistan once the ISAF forces, the NATO forces led by the United States, pull out the bulk of their troops by the end of 2014, which is just around the corner. So it's anybody's guess. But yes, there is a potential that Afghanistan will be the proxy battleground between India, Pakistan, but also not only India, Pakistan. You have Russia, you have the stands, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, you have China, of course, and you have, let us not forget, Iran. Iran will be having its own issues as it attempts to become a nuclear power. It will be terribly focused more on the Levant, on Lebanon and Syria, than it will be on Pakistan. But there is a border also between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and between Iran and Afghanistan. So these three countries will interact independently of India.
Nawaz Sharif seems to be toing and froing in terms of dealing with a very sensitive issue in India, that's the Mumbai attacks of 26/11. And there are already warnings being issued to Nawaz Sharif by hardliners to say, don't go so soft in India, don't give in too many concessions, particularly on Kashmir. So its history has shown whenever bilateral relations between the two countries improve, there's something like Mumbai happens and it spoils the party. What are your predictions for that?
It's very possible that there could be another attack. I don't see an attack to the level of a Mumbai attack. India has much better counterterrorism defenses. They were totally caught off guard in 26/11. But B, I don't think it's in the interest of Pakistan, either the army or the government, to allow any such attack. Now, the question is, can these extremists do an attack without the army's approval and, of course, without Nawaz Sharif's approval? And I think what you're saying in the question is there a possibility that Nawaz Sharif will wink, give like a yellow light, an amber light to these extremists, while not telling them to do an attack, will kind of, will not tell them not to do an attack, if you know what I mean. And that is a serious problem.
Learning to live with them would be the phrase.
Yes, yes. So there is a danger that we could have a cross-border attack, and that will provoke India to a response. And let us not forget that the fundamental cause of problems between India and Pakistan is the insecurity of Pakistan, in particular the insecurity of Pakistan's military.
Well, that's an interesting point, Jonathan. Clearly, the insecurity of Pakistan and its institutions and the non-state actors leads Pakistan to continue to challenge India. But most importantly, people in New Delhi will need to watch very carefully how the Pakistan army responds to Sharif's efforts to improve relations with India. We'll be back next week with another episode of Latitude. Until then, thank you and goodbye.